It's my great pleasure, and it's a true honor to introduce our 2012 Leadership Summit guest speaker. He was the commanding general of the Army and Air Force Exchange Service, which is the Department of Defense's profit center, producing over $10 billion in revenue. It's a Fortune 500 company. Kind of odd that the Army and Air Force would have that. So he knows a little bit about selling too. It's my great pleasure to introduce General Keith Thurgood.
Very good. Well, thank you very much for having me here today. And I know I'm the last guy between you and a beer or whatever you drink. Now, I don't know if you've heard generals talk before, but they have a tendency to talk a lot. So, Bob, at the appropriate time, just give me the hook. Now, my sales team, when I'm not on active duty, and I've been on active duty for a period of time now, but I've had the opportunity to lead several organizations, including this Fortune 500 company that Bob talked about. And it's totally counterintuitive to you, I know, that the Army or the government would have a for-profit arm. But we had 3,000 stores spread across 30 countries, and our job was to create revenue and profit. And I reported to a board of directors, and the board of directors would ask everything that your bosses talk about. What's the return on invested capital? How's the sales team doing? What's the value proposition? How you measuring performance? You have an integrated human capital management strategy? That's what we did for the 3 years I led that organization. And my sales team used to always tell me, nothing happens until somebody sells something. No matter if we were manufacturing, products or whatever. But in the Army, since I'm a logistician, I remind the Army that nothing happens in the Army until a truck moves. Well, I want to talk to you about a couple things here. Show you a couple pictures, and I want to tell my story in some pictures. So this is the Army story. Go Army. Or we have the Navy. All right? So Army, Navy. So if you have children that want to join the service, have them come and talk to me. Those are actually some pilots out in the Persian Gulf doing what our good Navy pilots do. So I want to talk a little bit today about leadership because I have come to the conclusion that it does not matter what type of organization you're in. At the end of the day, it's always about leaders at every single level of the organization making a difference. And in the United States Army, we have leaders at every single level. And so in the Army, our job, my job, is to make sure that that soldier has got everything that he or she needs to fight and win America's battles. And it's your Army. We serve you, the American people. And the military, and the Army specifically, does two things really, really well that every organization wants. They grow leaders, and they deliver results. That's what we do. And for 236 years, your Army, America's Army, has fought and won the nation's battle when the President asked us to go do that. We've secured peace, we've conducted humanitarian operations, and we've constructed roads all over the globe. So if you want somebody that's going to make a difference in your organization, hire a vet. Because they'll come to your organization with two things you need. Somebody that's going to deliver results, and they're going to provide leadership. And oh, by the way, they're going to show up to work. They're going to be drug-free. They've got a value system. They understand diversity and inclusion. They can work collaboratively at the strategic level and all the way down to the tactical level. So I want to tell you a couple stories here. And the first story is about this soldier right here. His name was Specialist Girardi. Now, Bob didn't mention this, but in the Army and Air Force Exchange Service, not only do we run all of the retail stores, which are assorted like a Target, we ran all of the e-commerce business and the catalog business, the credit card business. We ran all their C-stores globally, all the movie theaters and gas stations. in all the fast food. So my organization is the third largest franchisee. I keep saying mine as if I'm still there. I've been gone for a couple of years. The third largest franchisee of Burger King in the world. In fact, when you go to eat a Burger King biscuit and sausage or whatever they're called, that biscuit, believe it or not, was actually made and developed in conjunction with the Burger King team at our headquarters when I was here right in Dallas, Texas. There you go. In 2007, when I was in that job, Specialist Girardi was at a Burger King that we built in Baghdad. Now, you can imagine a soldier eats our soldiers love fast food. They eat a lot of burgers, a lot of pizza, a lot of Baskin-Robbins. Some of them a little too much. He was standing in line to get his hamburger when there was a mortar attack. And the mortars came in and blew up the Burger King and killed 3 people and wounded several others. And Specialist Girardi was in line to get his hamburger. And when the mortar attack came in, he did what we want all of our leaders to do, what we expect all of our soldiers to do. He helped police up the battlefield. He helped the wounded, picked stuff up. And then about 2 or 3 hours after the incident was over, he just quietly went back to his unit. And the next day he was out doing dismounted patrols. He came back to the Burger King about 2 or 3 days later after we had rebuilt it. And he walked up to the manager and he said, with his bloody receipt in his hand, "Do you remember me?" And the manager said, no, I really don't remember. He said, well, I was here when the Burger King got blown up. And the thing is, I never got my hamburger. I never got my hamburger. You know what our manager told him? We said, no, you can't have your hamburger. And we said no because we have a policy. And the policy is you can't come back with your receipt 2 or 3 days later and get a hamburger. Now, if you're the Burger King manager and you're responsible for the P&L of that little Burger King, that might make sense. Because, you know, when you go to a fast food restaurant, how many receipts are there? They're all over the place. So the policy was designed to prevent, somebody from getting a free hamburger every once in a while. So we said no, and because most of our soldiers are humble, he said okay, and he just kind of went back to his unit. Well, as luck would have it, I'm reading this story on an airplane in the newspaper. And I'm like, this can't be right. There's no way we would not give this soldier his hamburger. So I took a big red pen and I circled it and I sent it back to the chief operating officer. And I said, please tell me we did not do this to this soldier. And sure enough, we did the investigation and we did it. Because we had a policy. Now, there's a good ending to this story. I called the CEO of Burger King, because remember, we do a lot of business with Burger King. He was actually home on leave when this picture was taken. So the Burger King executives flew to his house, and we took he and his family out to dinner, and we gave him burgers for life. So one of the things that leaders have to do is when there are policies and procedures and regulations that don't make sense, you have to beat them down like a whack-a-mole. You have to defeat the status quo. Because if you don't, and you don't have enough personal courage, when your employee comes to you saying, I didn't get my burger, you're going to say no, and you're going to say no because it's the easy way. So leaders have to choose the harder right and not take the easy wrong. So a couple other stories for you. The strength of the nation is the United States Army. The strength of the Army is our soldiers. And the strength of our soldiers is our family. And the nation's premier institute for leadership development is the United States Army. So I said earlier, you want to have somebody that's going to make an immediate impact in your business? Hire a vet. Because there's a really fast learning curve. They'll be focused on what you want them to do, and they can make a difference. And I'm involved with a bunch of things right now back in Washington, including the President's Council on Jobs and with the Department of Defense, etc. So we've got a way now to connect this great supply of talent that we have in the United States with the demand that I see all across the United States as I talk to CEOs. So I want to leave you with three things. Now, we don't have time to get into all of these into the detail. In fact, I probably already took too much time telling you the first story. Number one, be, do, get. Number two, play above the line. And number three, you make a difference. So let me talk about each of those for just a minute. When I think about effective leadership, I think about working from the inside out. And very often we confuse leaders with people that are great communicators, or they have a charismatic personality. And we say, that's a leader. I think those are very important skills. But it's not, in my estimation, what makes a leader. What makes a leader is to first focus on the be, the very essence of your existence, and your definition of a leader is defined by what you decide you want to be. And once you're clear on that, everything else falls into place. And you can take that exact same principle and apply it to your teams and to your organizations. If you're not clear on your organization's vision and you can't tie that back to individual performance, you're going to fail. You can't tie the vision of your team with individual performance, you're going to fail. So one of the first responsibilities of a leader is to define the current reality. And it doesn't matter if you're talking about an organizational construct or down to the individual. So I would suggest to you, under this idea of be, do, get, figure out what you want to be. Take some time to think about it. Because once you determine that, what it is, those values, that be, if you will drive behavior. And behavior will drive action. And action drives results at the end of the day. So be is about values. Doing is about executing. And get is the natural fruit of doing those two things right. It's like I used to tell my senior vice president of sales. We're not trying to sell anything in our stores or on the internet. What we're trying to do is understand the needs of our customer. And once we understand that, we'll offer them a solution that meets that need. And the natural consequence of offering that solution and meeting that need is we're going to sell something. So be, do, get. A couple other things to think about. Because in that construct, identity is destiny. Failure to get that right is a failure in leadership, in my estimation. Identity is destiny. Now, I want to throw a couple other things for you to think about here. What I call my 3D model of leadership. You want to get great results, you got to have great people. You got to have great leaders at every level of the organization. So the first thing I think you have to do is define the kind of leaders and managers that you want. And you've got to think very carefully about what that is. Because once you are clear on that, again, the be, the define. Now you can craft a hiring strategy and a retention strategy. But first spend a lot of time on that. And at the very heart of this definition is this idea of integrity and trust and personal trustworthiness. And again, we won't have time to develop that fully today. But the second thing is, once you decide what those kinds of folks are, the kinds of leaders that you want, now you have to develop them. And you develop them based on what you've defined. And you can develop people in a bunch of different ways, whether it's 360 feedback or e-learning or pick a venue. It doesn't really matter. But here's what I do know. You have to let people play to their strengths. Weakness fixing will give you some short-term gains, but you want to provide value, you let leaders and team members play to their strengths. So here's my analogy. I can take Derek Jeter. Now, I'm not a Yankees fan. I'm actually a Rangers fan. In fact, I like the sign I saw in Boston one day. I like the Boston Red Sox and any team that beats the Yankees at the end of the day. Okay? But I can take Derek Jeter and I can send him to the Roger Clemens pitching school. In fact, I can send him there multiple times. But I don't care how often you send Derek Jeter to the Roger Clemens pitching school, he's never going to be Roger Clemens. I don't care how much training you give him. And likewise, I can send Roger Clemens to the Derek Jeter shortstop school. Roger Clemens is never going to be Derek Jeter. I don't care how many seminars he goes to and how many books you give him to read. So one of the jobs of leaders is to develop people that allows them to play their strengths in different ways than we have before. You can't force people into a round spot when they're squares. And then finally, deploy people. So you define them, you develop them, and then you deploy them into the organization so they can make a fundamental difference. And then the cycle starts over again in terms of development, because the best developmental opportunity for leaders is to put them in positions that stretch their thinking and takes them out of their comfort zone. There's two great things when I think about leadership. If I had to define leadership, I define it as one author wrote, the combination of character and results is effective leadership. And you have to have both of those. Character is first and foremost about trust and integrity and doing the right thing for the right reasons. And secondly, it's about the competencies, the knowledge, the skill sets, and the attributes that you want your leaders to have in order to make a difference in your organization. And why do you need both? Because we just don't want leaders of integrity. We value that and we honor that, and that's the centerpiece. But we need leaders that deliver results. And likewise, we don't want you to deliver results in any way. The means does not justify the end. And therefore, the combination of leaders of character that deliver results is about effective leadership. Because think of this, 90% of all leadership failures are failures of integrity. Notice where expert comes down. It's not that people don't have the knowledge, skills, and attributes. 90% of all leadership failures are failures of integrity. So, think of that. Character plus results is effective leadership. So that's one, be, do, get. So if you don't do that, you're going to end up like this guy. Okay, so the guy's scraping his window. It's cold. Falls down. Do the best you can. Now he's getting ready to get in his car. You can't hear it, but you can see it. He scraped off the wrong car. Okay? So that little metaphor is what happens in organizations that aren't clear about what they're trying to accomplish. That little metaphor is what happens when leaders aren't clear about what their B is. Identity is destiny. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about, number 2, is playing above the line. So I'm going to tell you another story. It's a baseball story. Mario Mendoza played for the Pittsburgh Pirates from 1974, and he was in the league until 1982. Finished with the great Texas Rangers, who maybe this year can win the series. But the thing about Mario Mendoza was, though, he was terrible on offense. In fact, he was so bad, after almost 10 years in the league, he only hit 4 home runs. I think Bob could hit 4 home runs. His batting average was .212. I might be able to get .212. So what sportscasters started to say, he was great on defense, though. He was super on defense. But over time, what the sportscasters started to say was, look, if you're not playing above the Mendoza line, you're not batting .200, you don't even belong in the league. So the Mendoza line is the minimum standard of acceptance. Now, you probably have folks on your team, they're not playing above the Mendoza line. Just like we have sometimes in the United States Army, soldiers that don't meet our standards, or in any retail organization. So you got to have people playing above the line. So if they're not playing above the line, what do you have to do? I'm going to coach you, I'm going to teach you, I'm going to mentor you. I'm going to give you all the resources you need to be successful. Because to the extent that you're successful, the team is successful. And to the extent the team wins, the organization wins. So you got to play above the line. And I think you got to play above the line in two areas. One, you've got to be as efficient as you can be. And to win and play in today's global market, you got to be taking cost out of the system every single year. Now, some people think that's an ugly word, productivity. But I'm telling you, if you can't take 5% of the cost out of your enterprise, you're not playing above the line. So you got to be as efficient as you can. And that's what our great managers do. They do things right. But the second piece of this is you got to play above the line in terms of effectiveness. So you, as a leader, have to make sure that you're doing the right things. So it's the combination of getting in this upper right-hand quadrant here where you're both effective and efficient. That's playing above the line. And that's what leaders do. So the question is, where are you playing? Where's your team playing? Are they playing above the line? Or maybe they don't even belong in the league. Okay. Number 3, you make a difference. You make a difference. So I'm going to tell you the story of the 20th Maine. The 20th Maine, it's the 2nd of July, 1863. General Lee has just moved his soldiers, the Northern Army of Virginia, into Pennsylvania, into a little town called Gettysburg. On the 2nd of July, the skirmishes start to take place, and the Union Army recognizes that there's a hill that has not been occupied yet. And the name of that hill is Little Round Top. And so the colonel in charge of that area said, I've got to send some soldiers up there. And so he chose the 20th Maine, led by a guy named Colonel Joshua Chamberlain. Now, Joshua Chamberlain wasn't even a professional soldier. In fact, he was a professor at Bodine College in Maine. He's later governor of Maine. He's later president of the university. The 20th Maine had been marching all day. They'd marched in the past 4 days 100 miles in a uniform like this. Nasty. July, it's hot, bad news bears. But they see that if they don't have soldiers on Little Round Top, the battle's going to be lost. And so just as the 20th Maine is getting some rest, he rallies Joshua Chamberlain's brigade, and he says, go to Little Round Top. And oh, by the way, remember this, Colonel, you're the last unit on the far left of the Union line. There's nobody past you. So if the Confederates get past you, they will outflank our line. They'll come up from behind us. Gettysburg will be lost, and perhaps we would have a different outcome of the war, which would lead to a different outcome with our allies at the time, and even maybe a different United States today. So Joshua Chamberlain starts out with 350 or so soldiers. And at first they're double stacked. But he soon recognizes that he's not stretched out far enough, and the Confederate soldiers can outflank him. And so what he decides to do is he takes all 300 of his soldiers or so, and he lines them out as thin as he can make them. And at the very end of the line, he takes his guidon, and he sticks it in the ground. And he says, this is where we defend Little Round Top. They cannot get on the other side of this guidon. And just as he's doing that, the Confederates were rushing to Little Round Top because they recognized the same thing. So the 14th and the 47th Alabama units attack. They attack up the hill. They're repelled. They attack up the hill again. They're repelled. They attack up again, and they're repelled. By this time, Colonel Chamberlain is down to 130 or so, 150 of his 350 or so soldiers. He's running out of ammunition. He doesn't know what else to do. There's another attack from the Confederates. So he said 2 words that put him in the history books. He said, fix bayonets. And all the soldiers put their bayonets on. And he led the charge down the hill, you can see him right here, that repelled the Confederates, Little Round Top was held, and Gettysburg turns out to be a victory for the Union Army. Now, it wasn't quite over for the 20th Maine because they wanted to give him a rest, and so they took him to the middle of the line the next day. And you know what happened the next day at that exact spot where they were? Pickett's charge. So one person can make a difference. One person can make a difference in any organization. And so I go back to what I started with at the beginning. Leaders at every single level make a difference in everything that we do. So a couple of closing thoughts here. Remember this. There's two great enemies to change. History and success. And so you have to constantly build on the legacy, but don't let it get in the way of change. And then finally, last couple slides here, what I call my 2 rules of the road, or my 4 rules of the road. So when I'm talking about leadership and I'm in front of thousands of soldiers, I want them to remember 4 things. Number 1, don't bunt. When you get up to the plate, we want you to swing hard. Now, as leaders, when you're asking your team to swing hard, what happens sometimes? They strike out. So one of the great challenges of leaders is to get the balance right. So you have to underwrite a certain amount of risk when you're asking people not to bunt. Because the first time you try to slam somebody for making a decision that you didn't agree with, you're starting to lose the battle. So don't bunt. Be bold, swing hard, belong to the fellowship of the doers. Number 2, no second place trophies. Everything we do in the United States Army, everything that we do in organizations, as people in our communities, in our businesses, in our teams, it's about excellence. Now, we don't always get it right. Teams don't always get it right, and organizations don't always get it right. But we're always trying to do our best, and we're helping others to do their best. So we are either pioneers or we're settlers. Number 3, this is probably the only thing that you'll remember today, except maybe playing above the line. Look for yellow cars. Now, I don't know how many of you are veterans out here, or some of you have been to Iraq potentially, but the car of choice in Iraq is the white Toyota pickup truck. It's ubiquitous. And it's everything from I'm taking my family to the zoo, to the store, to I'm going to mount a 50 cal machine gun on it. So it was my way of telling my soldiers, when you go into an area and you see something other than a yellow car, pay attention. Because how you react to that change might save your life or the life of your buddy. Now, we're not in a combat zone right now. We're in a nice environment. So what does that mean? Well, it means to me that none of us are as smart as all of us. And nobody in this room has got a corner on how to create leads and how to increase sales. But when you get together and you talk about it, you come up with some really creative, great ideas. And you learn to collaborate at a totally different level. So look for yellow cars. Look for things that you would not ordinarily look for. And number 4, solve for yes. So the world is full of naysayers. And they say no just because they can. There's no good reason for it. So if you've had a conversation with your general counsel lately, the first words out of their mouth are no, because they're trying to protect the enterprise. So, solve for yes. Figure out how to be part of the solution and not part of the problem. And those are my things that I talk about. So the last slide I have is this one. Nothing breeds success like failure. And its sister, nothing breeds failure like success. So just when you think you're good is when you need to look in the mirror, because the competition is going to be nipping at your heels. So thanks for spending a few minutes with me here today. Thanks for everything you do to support our great Army. And thanks for making a difference in your communities and in your businesses. And remember, you want somebody that's going to make a difference in your business, think about hiring a vet. Thanks a lot. Have a great rest of the conference.